a very fine line to walk because the National Labor Relations Act does provide for discrimination remedies where you discriminate against an individual for engaging in protected or union-oriented activities. Watch the WARN Act. There are two bills kicking around out there. Alert is one that would simply expand the definition of a mass layoff, and part of its problem is that it would double back pay for employees. The one I'm more concerned about is the WARN Act, and that particular law would amend the current WARN Act and would require smaller employers, that is people with at least 75 employees, to notify workers of mass firings or plant closings. And it would reduce the amount of laid-off employees needed to constitute a plant closing from 50 to 25, as well as require WARN notices to go out 90 days rather than 60 days before a plant closing or mass layoff. This is very difficult, particularly where an employer is attempting to right its ship or otherwise sell its assets. The 90-day program would be really difficult for employers to deal with on a fair basis. And in essence, the failure to do so, though, would increase lawyer liability for employers to double back pay. And that, again, gets back to what people received in terms of notice and whether they were paid for the full amount of the notice. And we're almost done, actually. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the enforcement activity that's on the rise. Wage and hour audits are huge. We're seeing more and more of them. We're seeing overtime audits, not with respect necessarily to just the exempt, non-exempt classifications, and whether you're looking at having failed to classify somebody correctly and now owe them overtime. We're looking at overtime audits with respect to the traditional areas like sales employees who might be paid on commission basis, may have training obligations. And so they're focusing not so much on classification issues as on whether you're actually paying them for time worked or time that the Department of Labor considers to be time worked, even though traditionally it might not have been required time. So watch your overtime audits on things outside of the white-collar classifications. Of course, white-collar classification audits are, continuing to be big, but we're seeing more and more audits having to do with the more difficult areas of wage calculation, such as, again, sales who are commissioned or non-commissioned or partially commissioned and so forth. One of the big things coming down the pike are independent contractor investigations. Lots of possible bad outcomes here, but in essence, President Obama's budget proposal for 2011 proposes an increase to the DOL's budget of $25 million for what is called a misclassification initiative. And this is to target misclassification of employees as independent contractors. They're going to hire at least 100 enforcement personnel to pursue the initiative, and additional funding will be provided to states to enable them to boost their own enforcement activities. We're also going to see IRS audits. They're suggesting about 6,000 audits focused on employment tax issues over the next 3 years, and a lot of state initiatives that combat misclassification. Employers who misclassify workers as independent contractors face a number of liabilities, and this includes unpaid income tax withholdings, unpaid Medicare and Social Security contributions, workers' compensation and unemployment premiums, back wages for unpaid overtime, and possibly pension payments, medical benefits, and stock options. And so this is one where I strongly urge you to take a look at your own classifications and ensure that you have people classified not only appropriately under the federal wage and hour laws, but take a look at independent contractor issues. A lot of employers still use independent contractors where they don't want to provide benefits for people, or where they have other types of I guess they're resisting bringing them under the employee umbrella. And a lot of people prefer to be considered independent contractors as well, but I'm suggesting that that's going to be one of the hottest areas of enforcement activity that we see in the year to come. Likewise, enforcement activity is on the rise for government contractors. I can't tell you how much more affirmative action audit activity I'm seeing over this time last year and then the prior years before that under the Bush administration. So again, I think we're looking at an enforcement president as opposed to an outreach president. And we're also looking at government contractors who classify themselves in accordance with various small business administration programs. We're seeing a lot of questioning and contract argument with respect to whether they are classified correctly or holding themselves out correctly. Finally, there are some Supreme Court cases to watch that have to do with ERISA litigation and another statute of limitations for filing a pay or disparate impact claim. But I'm sure you'll hear all about those when they're decided, and probably not until June of this year. And then finally, when we look at 2009, 2010, and beyond, we see all of these things. It's going to have a tremendous amount of employment litigation based on the economy, and the reduction in force litigation is starting to hit in waves now, depending on where you're located. We're going to see the FLSA, or Fair Labor Standards Act, class litigation rising. I didn't talk about that in great detail on this because that's a whole hour in itself. Lots of ERISA litigation, particularly with respect to administrators and fiduciary duty. We'll see a great deal of that. We're going to see legislation that permits for paid time off and other employee benefits, such as health care and some other aspects of that. And then I think we're going to see some employer-sponsored benefits, retirement benefits, health care benefits in flux while they wait to see what the impact of pending legislation is on them. So I think it's going to be a very, very busy year in 2010. I think 2009 was an extremely busy year as well. I think 2010 is going to be very expensive for employers. And so I'll close by saying that some of the best practices for you are going to include auditing your own workplace practices. And I'll say that, do it before someone else does it for you. And thank you so much for your attention. Xander?
Great. Thank you, Catherine. That was a lot of information, and I think based on the time, we probably need to end the webinar, and we'll answer the questions offline.